This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast. Nick Cattles is not here. I'm going solo on this one. This is the solo album of the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast. But I do have a wingman, and it is none other than a BSJ NFL draft analyst, Kevin Field. Kevin, welcome. It's a popular time of year this year for you. We get to draft a little bit late. You've been doing a year round at BSJ and been doing a great job. By the way, Kevin's been writing up, throughout the season. I know a lot of fans are sort of like myself. They sort of catch up on the draft in the last month, but for those draft nicks out there, every week, Kevin's been out there telling you who to watch, his interpretation of, what those guys are doing, how they might fit with the Patriots or in the draft in general. And so I wanted, now we're in the stretch drive here, 18 days. Now it's Sunday, Masters Sunday. Kevin and I are potting because he's an international man of mystery, and I think he's getting on a plane pretty soon for a few days. But I sort of want to, in the run-up to the draft, we'll have Kevin once a week to offset our other podcasts. Probably draft week, we might go a couple times going in. Get Kevin on the horn after the draft, after the rounds, and maybe after the individual picks, just to sort of get stuff up for the podcast and video. But Kevin, welcome. And this is long overdue. Again, you've been doing great work at BSJ. I greatly appreciate it. I know our readers do, our members. And hey, why don't you just real quick sort of tell us about yourself, how you got into the draft world. Kevin he was at the Senior Bowl this year. I think his analysis has been really good for a guy who's somewhat new to it, at least in print, and sort of how you go about your job. How do you watch all these freaking guys?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Appreciate the opportunity. Super excited to be on the podcast today and speaking to all the BSJ members and Patriots fans. If you're a Patriots fan and you're not a BSJ member, as someone that has subscribed for a long time, I definitely suggest heading over there. Lots of great content on the site. But by way of introduction, my name is Kevin Field. I'm a born and bred local guy. I grew up.
I can't tell from your accent.
Yeah, exactly. And if I had a few pops, it would be even stronger, right? But I grew up a couple towns over from Foxborough. I've lived in South Boston for 15 years, as Greg kind of alludes to. I have a much different background than probably some of the other local media writers. I would probably frame that in the sense of there's three things I spend most of my time on. The first is just as all of us, family commitments. I think I'm wonderfully blessed on that side of the house, and they provide me a lot of opportunity and flexibility. I do a lot of work, a lot of football that I watch, as you kind of reference, Greg, and then writing for BSJ. The second thing that I spend a lot of time on, and I'm super passionate about, is I work for run a large business unit for a large healthcare company in Boston. I'm really passionate about that mission and making an impact on patients' lives. And I actually get to see that day in and day out kind of impact. My wife is an oncology nurse over at the Brigham and Dana-Farber. And then the third thing, which is why we're here talking today, is I'm a rabid Boston sports fan. When it comes to football, Patriots specifically, I am a pig in poo. I absolutely love it. I've always loved it. And one of the things that my friends and coaches have always told me is, Kev, not only do you understand the game really well, but you look at the game a little bit differently. You focus on the personnel versus the play. And that's what's kind of led to, our interaction, Greg, is the opportunity that we've taken a little bit different approach than maybe some of the other outlets in the local media, which is focusing on the draft week in and week out throughout the year. And so if you're just a regular guy or girl watching football on a Saturday on the couch, maybe not a college football fan, or there's a game on Saturday night while you're out with friends, who should you be focusing on? who are those top 50, 75 guys that are going to be in the draft the next year? And who are those guys that are going to be good fits for the Patriots? And so we write about that, focus on most of the major college programs and big games. And then after the season ends, we focus on specifically the Patriots, breaking down different position groups, different areas of focus for the team, how they drafted historically, and who would be good fits around that focus. And so, as we talked early, Greg, I said, I'm not going to ask for a job. I'm going to earn an opportunity here. And I think we've had a good run leading into the 22 draft.
That's for sure. So did you play?
I did. I played in high school. I'm 5'9". Yeah.
There you go.
175. So my football career was never going to go too far, but I played in the Hockomock League and played through high school. Loved the game, and that led me to always following the game right from the early Parcells days till today.
I think you and Connor Ryan will have to. First of all, you're part of the all BSJ accent team, and you're going to need to start some Southie BSJ.
A neighborhood watch.
Exactly. All right, let's dive into sort of a discussion. So Kevin has a new mock draft. We're taping this on Sunday. On Monday, we will be posting his latest mock draft. I think he had his last one about a month ago. It was right after the combine, I think. And definitely this is his third version. Some definite surprises. I know, was it both previous drafts you had Devin Lloyd, the Utah linebacker, going to the Patriots? Is that correct?
Yeah. Both first two mocks, Lloyd was available at 21.
Okay, this time you have Devin Lloyd going 11th to the Washington Commanders. Just real quick on that, something you're hearing, something, sort of maybe pro day related. Why do you think suddenly Devin Lloyd is going from like 21 to say bordering on the top 10?
Yeah, not something I'm hearing. I just think he's a 3-down player. The fact he ran a 4.66 in the combine was almost good for the Patriots. He plays fast on film. He can get after the quarterback. He had I think it was 8 sacks last year. He was a former safety. He can play the pass, has 3 career interceptions for touchdowns. He has 110 tackles this year. He's a great football player. And in the middle of that defense, the Commanders defense needs a linebacker. And so given that I originally had them going with a quarterback, given that they made the move for Carson Wentz, I think that they'll focus on defense. And at that point, he's based off what they need, he's the best defensive player available.
Who is the I've lost track of some of the other teams, especially a team as irrelevant as Washington. Who is it's Jack Del Rio is the defense coordinator there still. So yeah, I could see him definitely fitting in that scheme. Now for the Patriots, this was a little bit of a shocker. You have the Patriots at 21 trading down. Not a big surprise. I think the Patriots ultimately do that just because when you get into 21, when you get past about 16, 17, 18, you're talking about fringe first round prospects. And, maybe you want the 5th year, maybe you don't. That can be a factor, but why not trade down in the round? And that's what you have. Tell us about the scenario that you have for the Patriots and, why you think that might be an option.
Yeah, I think that so just for the members so that they're aware. So I have the Patriots trading back to 30 with Kansas City making the trade there. I think the Chiefs are a classic trade-up candidate. They have 2 picks in the first round. They'll be looking to get a rusher. They'll be needing some secondary help. And Jamison Williams, that's the point in the draft where he'll start to be targeted if he's available. And so at that point, the Chiefs could say he's fallen enough. Let's go up to get him, given the cost. He's going to be the heir apparent to Tyreek Hill once he gets healthy. And I think that they'll be able to give him some time to get healthy. And so in this scenario, the Patriots would look at it and say, hey, listen, we can get some capital, trade back into a deep draft. They would grab the 30th pick the 62nd pick, which is the Chiefs' second rounder, that I think the Chiefs would be willing to forfeit, given they also have the 29th pick, and then landing late in the draft, day 3 pick. I gave him a 7th rounder. Patriots might actually value a 6th rounder, something like that next year. But in that scenario, Patriots fall back to 30, and I had them taking Daxton Hill, who is the really defensive back. He plays, slot corner, as well as safety. He comes from Michigan. He, when you see him on film or you're watching a game, he's as close to Devin McCourty as I've seen in some time. He's got the speed. He's got a great 3-cone. He's an athletic player. No one's going to question his athleticism. He led Michigan in pass breakups last year, led them in interceptions, really versatile player. So he's not an outside corner, but he's a guy that you could stick on the inside and contribute. Is scheme versatile, could stay on the field and really help that defense in the back end of that defense.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because, after you wrote him up pretty good, I think about a week ago, and I remember I went and watched some film on him, and, I think you're exactly right. I think his versatility, his athletic ability, plus he's from Michigan, and the Patriots are on a Michigan heater right now, with some of their intel out of there. He certainly fits. What's interesting, and I've written about it a lot, talked about it some on the pod, is that I think at least traditionally, maybe not when Belichick sort of goes into a slumber when it comes to the draft, but traditionally, you look at their depth chart and you see where guys are coming up on a contract year, you're like, all right, well, they're going to sort of cover their bases, create leverage with somebody. And they haven't done it in recent years, which has been perplexing and I think has led to some unfortunate decisions as far as their assets, whether it's Joe Tooney, J.C. Jackson, Stephon Gilmore. I mean, the list sort of goes on and on recently. But if they get back on their horse, which I think they need to, I mean, when they were going at their best, they were doing this. Jonathan Jones is in a contract year. We don't know what they have out of Malcolm Butler or, Jalen Mills or Sean Wade or, is McCourty gone after this year? I mean, he's on a 1-year deal again. Who knows? He's gone. They don't really have a free safety. We don't know about Joshua Bledsoe. Kyle Duggar's not a free safety. Adrian Phillips is not a free safety. Jabril Peppers, I don't really think. Do you think he's a free safety? He's more of a box linebacker than anything.
I think he's a strong safety, versatile player that could play in the box, and they'll use him, bring him, coming forward.
So Dax, a pick like Dax Hill would give them coverage in a lot of areas and just say, all right, well, if Jonathan Jones doesn't want to take our contract extension offer, he can go to market and we have a guy that we can plug and play. I mean, Miles Bryant can play in the slot. I don't think, I think he's a really good player. Of course, he was burned sometimes last year. I think slot cornerback is like the hardest position outside of quarterback in the league because it's a two-way go. And if you don't get a lot of pressure, forget it. Those guys have no chance against a guy like Isaiah McKenzie. I think Miles Bryant's a good player. I think he can replace Jonathan Jones. I mean, he was an undrafted guy. He's going to be going into his 3rd year. He quickly, as a rookie, as an undrafted guy, it was almost unheard of that he's playing different positions, free safety, different safety spots, cornerback. Like, that's unheard of with the Patriots. So I'm a big Miles Bryant guy, and I think he could do the slot, but Dax Hill can do a lot of different things. So that's interesting on your mock draft, and we'll sort of get into the nuts and bolts of it later. Speaking of, you have them trading down. In my column today on BSJ, I explored the possibility of them trading up because, mostly you have to touch it, Kevin, because that's what most fans are dreaming about this year. They're dreaming about the big move. The Patriots, they traded for Devontae Parker, somewhat of a big move, not a huge move. But, they want, every NFL fan goes into the draft, even though most of the evidence is to the contrary, that their team is going to pick the guy that makes a difference, trade up, make a big swing. It's going to make a huge difference in their team, even though it doesn't happen. So I explored the possibility of that with the Patriots. Now, the Patriots can only jump. They don't have a ton of weapons as far as what they have as draft picks and things like that. They're at 21. They have, second and third round picks, and then they have 4th, 2 5ths, 2 6ths. Of course, you have future years, but, that doesn't really, go very far. So, I sort of looked at it and I said, if they do move up, what's sort of their arsenal? And really, if you package according to the trade value chart, if you package their first and second round pick, that gets you to around pick 12. If you say we're going up for a specific guy, first and second round, their first and third round pick gets them to about 16, anywhere in that realm. And so they can move anywhere from 12, maybe 11, if they kick in a little bit more, all the way down to 20, Pittsburgh, the spot in front of them. So that's sort of the background. Then you look at the teams that are in that area. And to me, there's 4 teams that stand out. And actually, these 4 teams have 6 of the 8 picks from 12 to 21 or 13 to 21. That's the Texans, Nick Caserio, old buddy here. The Ravens, never been afraid to do a deal with the Patriots. They're very sure in their draft sort of philosophy. They don't really worry about what other people are doing. They'll trade with the Patriots. They've done it before. They were okay with losing Matthew Judon to the Patriots. The Eagles, probably the most popular Patriots trade partner ever. Howie Roseman, and it used to be Andy Reid and Joe Banner. Now it's Howie Roseman, loves to do deals with Belichick. They talk all the time, a lot of joint practices, things like that. And then you have the Saints. Sean Payton's no longer there, but Mickey Loomis, the GM, is still there. They still have a good relationship with the Patriots. So the Texans have 13, the Ravens have 14, the Eagles have 15 and 18, the Saints have 16 and 19. So really, we're talking about 13 to 19, somewhere in that range that the Patriots see somebody that they want, that they have to have. To me, Kevin, tell me if you disagree with this. Looking at the Patriots roster, pretty much they can line up tomorrow and be competitive. I mean, they have all their spots filled. Some fans might not like what they have, and of course, everybody thinks they need, a wide receiver, which they might need. But really, the Patriots have, at least decent starting guys at every position on offense and defense. This is normally the way they go, so they cover their tracks in terms of where they're going in the draft. But to me, there's 3 sort of glaring needs on the Patriots that I think if they were going to go up and target a guy, normally it's for a guy that, especially in the first round, it's a guy that addresses a huge need and can hit pretty quickly. We saw Dante Hightower and Chandler Jones. The last real trade up in the first round might have been the only one. You would probably know better than me. But Belichick had gone from not trading up at all to doing it twice in the same draft in the first round. And I think the Patriots, and also Patriots coming off 2011, they had gone to the Super Bowl, almost won the Super Bowl, but they were hot garbage on defense. They had no talent, and they jump up and they get 2 good guys who would impact quickly. You could sort of say the same thing about the Patriots right now, that they have defensively, some on offense, needs. See if you agree with this. The 3 glaring needs that I have for if the Patriots jump up in the first round, it's offensive tackle, because Isaiah Wynn's in a contract year. He's not even that good to begin with. He's average at best. Who's the starting left tackle in 2023? Is he on this roster? Could Trent Brown go over there and play? Yeah, maybe in theory, but on his return, they haven't shown any inclination to do that. I have a man coverage corner. Maybe they're just going to play zone and just say, hey, you can't play a defense anymore. The quarterbacks are too good. Jared Allen's too good, or Josh Allen. We're just going to play zone and hope to keep guys in front of us. They could be going to that. I don't know. Maybe they don't have man coverage corner. I have it on my list still because I think at some point in time, you need to be able to man up. And then I have an interior run stuffer, a guy that put him in there. He's going to take up blockers. They're going to be like, holy hell, we can't run through that hole. And I think that makes the Patriots immensely better. What do you think about those 3 needs? Do you agree? Are there any other things that you would add to that? And as far as immediate, they would trade up to solve this issue.
I think the three positions you call out are the three biggest glaring needs, right? 100%, a couple guys, cornerback, if they start to slip, would make sense for them to reasonably think about going up to get Davis or somebody that can help stop the run for sure. And then tackle is a obvious position of need. And there is a little bit of a tier there that they would miss if they don't go up and potentially get a tackle. So that's definitely a place.
Isn't there going to be a run? Isn't there going to be a run on tackles at some point in the first round?
Yeah, there's about 6 guys in that first 40 picks that I expect will go, and we're looking at the first 15 picks probably having 4 tackles, right?
Wow.
And so if you don't now, does Cross fall? Depends how teams kind of evaluate him. He's a wonderful. Athletic guy. He's got the left tackle prototypical size, and he's a great pass blocker. He needs work on the run game, right? He's coming from an offense that is very much a passing offense. His run blocking reps are not as strong. Penning's a little bit of the opposite. I think Penning is a guy that you could slide in potentially at guard early on. He plays like a mean. I compare him in the mock draft to playing style of a Richie Incognito. And he was the best tackle I saw. I expected Bernard Raymond from Central Michigan to be better going into this Senior Bowl. And I came out feeling that Penning was the best tackle. And he's really had a great kind of pre-draft process. But he's making a jump. His pass blocking reps, I think, could be an issue of speed. So, you're going up to get some guys that aren't perfect, but you certainly have a need, and the rest of the league has a need at offensive tackle, just like the rest of the league has a need at defensive back. One other guy I would add to that list that if they see them falling, they could potentially look at to come up is Jermaine Johnson II from Florida State. I think that an edge rusher is something that they should invest in, just like the rest of the NFL. You always need those guys. Defensive backs, offensive linemen, edge rushers are places that you can't ever be too deep. And he's a 3-down player, has the size to play the run, can certainly get after the quarterback, and can hold the edge. So he's a guy that I expect to go around. I don't see him getting past the Vikings at 12. But if he did start to fall, that is somebody that they could think about going up and get. One last thing.
I'll just say just one interjection on that. Like, I understand, you can never draft enough pass rushers, but the Patriots' recent history, they've thrown, a lot of resources at the edge. Chase Winovich, Josh Uche still hasn't gotten a chance. Ronnie Perkins redshirted last year. To me, if the Patriots do that, that means none of those guys can play. And that, there's a big problem. And I don't really believe that. I think that Uche and Perkins can both play. Of course, you also have Anthony Jennings, who we're not even sure what position he really plays, whether he's a edge guy or a stand-up guy. He did a little bit of everything at Alabama and looked like he was going to do that when he actually did play or hit the practice field, which was rare his first 2 years. But, yeah, I just wanted to interject that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I think that the Patriots will probably look at it as, we got 14 or 15 guys that we would think about drafting at 21. And then so if I did the percentages, I would say, I think there's a 10% chance they go up. Right. And I think that only happens if there's someone that they really love that fits those positions. That's only going to cost them, a few picks, even going up to 12 starts to become a lot. Right. So if it's 3, 4, 5 picks, I think it's something that they would think the cost is reasonable. You're never a player away. No matter how close we like to think we are, they'll think the same. And so I think there's a 40% chance they stay at 21. They can get a good player there. We'll talk about some of the guys that will be there probably in a minute or two. And then I think there's a 50% chance, just as we talked about in the mock, that they're going to say there's someone else. We have 3, 4 guys, 2, 3 guys that we feel comfortable with being there. If we trade back, we can get some more capital, which will allow us to work the board the rest of the weekend, and they'll look to trade back. But if they were trading up, the one guy I would want them to really trade up for, I'd be comfortable with kind of any of those guys. If Stingley starts to fall, he immediately makes your defense better next year. Jordan Davis, how he tested.
What about the injuries? I heard this off one of the member comments asked about Stingley and his injury history. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so the foot injury, the medical and his interview are going to be the most important part of his evaluation. And of course, that's a place where we won't have insight, but you got to trust them on that. He's got a foot injury he's coming off of, and that's one that can linger. And so if they're comfortable with it, then I think, you got to assume he'll be fine going forward. He is a top of the draft type talent. All right. His last 2 years, he's only played 10 games. And he didn't play at the level that I would have liked to have seen him played. But to be clear, his freshman year, when LSU won the national title, he was the best player on that defense. If you were to talk to, Chase or Jefferson, those two wide receivers that are, already making a huge impact on the NFL, they would tell you the battles that they had in practice, he was the best player that they went against. And so it's a great corollary between the ability to make an impact as a freshman in college and their ability to make an impact as a rookie in the NFL. And Stingley would immediately make your defense better. I don't think there's a chance he's there at 21. I know that you see some mock drafts that he's fallen. If he is, there's might be something that they're aware of or other teams are aware of that we're not. But even though he's played 10 games over the last 2 years, at that point, it is worth the risk. He immediately would make your defense better next year.
Wow. Did you have something on Davis to add before we?
Yeah, I like Davis. I've been writing about him kind of all year. That he's. I think the example John Henderson example was kind of spot on.
Hell yeah.
It looks the part, and
I think like Daryl Gardner too. For I grew up a Dolphins fan. You get. The Patriots could almost have their Daryl Gardner and Tim Bowens with Barmore and Jordan Davis. I mean, I love Jordan Davis. He's a mountain of a man. He can't be moved. He pushes the pocket, would make people feel uncomfortable there. I mean, just imagine Tua trying to throw the ball over him. Like, I don't know. I get irrationally excited when I think, of course, I have an affinity for big guys, sort of a former big guy myself, and I just get excited thinking about him in the middle of that line.
And they could really, they need somebody that can help them stop the run. There's just no question about that. And
Godchow gets blocked too easily. He cannot hold up the double teams. I don't know what happened to him. He used to be able to in Miami. He couldn't do it last year. They need a guy who you just stick in there and two guys just bounce off him and they can't move him. And it just makes the Patriots immensely better on defense.
100%. Now one thing on Davis and then to the point that you made. The key point for Davis is that he plays at 340, which is where he tested at the combine, and he showed up. One of the things that Devontae Wyatt, who's another D tackle from Georgia, said, I talked to him at the Senior Bowl, and he said, after that Alabama SEC game, they were floored. They felt like that they were out of shape, and Alabama was in a lot better shape, and Kirby Smart, essentially got on them after and in between the national title game or the playoffs and the SEC championship. And Jordan Davis played at least at 360 last year, right? And so they have a deep rotation down there where he only played 20 snaps a game. But if he's going to make the impact that you really want him to make, if you're picking him in the first round, he's got to play at that 340 number because he's plenty big, he's plenty strong at that number. What he did at the combine, he's a freak athletically. That's rare, and that's why he's worth it. But he's got to keep his weight in check. Now, the other guy I like is a nose tackle, and I've written about this quite a bit, is Travis Jones from UConn.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys that are nose tackles, they're bigger guys. They're not necessarily in the best shape in the world, but they're bigger guys. They're strong. Travis Jones he's the guy that, if you're in a dark alley, you want him on your side. And all I could think about when I met him, big shoulders, big hands, just a big dude with a broad chest. And I just remember, my first thought when I met him is, boy, that's the guy when they break the huddle and the other team comes to the line of scrimmage, you want him standing over the football. Really, really, really big kid. that was very impressive down the Senior Bowl. I don't know if he'll be there at 54, like the mock has it, based off of what the mock draft I did. That would be a wonderful pick at 54 if he was still available.
We have been talking for about 20 minutes, probably more than that, a half an hour, about what the Patriots might do, sort of their options in the first round, and we have not talked about receiver. I noticed that in your mock draft, you have guys on the clock at Patriots picking at 21 when they trade down. You have the Chiefs taking Jameson Williams from Alabama. You have Chris Olave from Ohio State going the pick after. Then the pick after that, you have Johan Dotson from Penn State who can play slot. I think when people see this, they're probably going to go jump off the Tobin ahead of time. Look, I know, and people know from listening to me, I'm not reaching for a wide receiver. I think the Patriots are, would I like to see them get better? I just think you can do it later. Get somebody with some upside, some speed, a speed element, maybe a slot guy later on in the draft. All these drafts are deep in receivers. Just Belichick has to, decide to pick one once in a while, not like N'Keal Harry. But sort of, what's your thinking about not taking a receiver, trading up for a receiver, or even taking one at 21 and letting the Chiefs get Jameson Williams, the Packers and Aaron Rodgers getting Chris Olave, and Kyler Murray getting Johan Dotson?
Yeah, and so I appreciate that might be relatively inflammatory for fellow Pats fans, and
Field, you're a hater. What the hell are you doing?
And I want them to have that talent on the outside too, right? But I just don't think it's in necessarily the DNA for them to do that, given where they're at right now. I think the one guy I would consider at 21, or they'll consider at 21, is Garrett Wilson if he was to fall. I don't expect him to be there. I think he's the best wide receiver in the draft. And maybe Drake London from USC, but he's more of a bigger guy, and we've all seen that script recently. So I think that I don't expect them to go wide receiver. I think that the guys that we talked about, if they fall, which has happened, right? They didn't expect when they were 21, they didn't expect Wilfork to be there, right? And they picked him and made a difference. So I think that there's a chance somebody falls that maybe we're not expecting. I don't love picking linebackers in the first round, but I think there's 2, maybe 3 that make the impact. That's why I referenced Lloyd, and I've talked about Dean in the past from Georgia. But I think they'll likely look at D-back, and if they take a cornerback or they take Hill at 21, I think it's because they have some conviction on them. And they could have 2 or 3 guys there and say, we're going to move back 8 or 9 picks and gamble that one will be there. If they stay and they select a D-back at 21, I think Patriots fans should have feel good about that signals that they have conviction on the player. They like them, and they'll be able to make an impact next year.
Well, let's talk about the linebackers a little bit and sort of, just a pick. If they stay put at 21, when I look at their depth chart, you hear, a lot of fans, and I even heard somebody, I was listening to Gasper and Murray's podcast, and somebody called in and be like, who the hell do they have nobody at linebacker, they need a linebacker. And I'm like, I don't know. I look at it. Look, I don't love some of these guys either, especially Juwan Bentley. But they obviously love him. And just look at Dietrich Wise. Like, when Belichick loves a guy, it doesn't matter what me or you think about him, or even, what his play really shows on film. He's going to be here, and he's going to get reps. Like, Dietrich Wise is going to get a lot of reps no matter what. Even if he's playing 3-4 end and getting slammed in the run game, he's still going to be out there. I think as of right now, without even Dante Hightower perhaps coming back at some point, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I tend to doubt that. I think Hightower's in along with the same mode as Gilmore, where it's like, all right, I made my bank. I have rings. I ain't getting off the couch unless you're giving me like a real contract. Like, I'm not doing these per game roster bonuses, whatever. So we'll see what happens with Hightower. But to me, the Mack Wilson trade gave them one of their starting linebacker spots. And I'm talking about 2 inside guys and sort of the base. They'll likely go to one linebacker a lot of times and having Jabril Peppers or Kyle Duggar or Phillips, one of their safeties in that role as well. But I think you have Juwan Bentley and Mac Wilson as the top 2 linebackers. You have Raekwon McMillan, who was I've always liked him as a player, especially a very good inside blitzer. I remember watching a lot of his film. I liked it when he was with the Dolphins. They had big plans for him last year till he got hurt. So I think he's going to get the opportunity to do that again. I think Cam McGrone, a guy from Michigan, and hurt, 2 of Belichick's favorite things, was drafted in the 5th round, would have went a lot earlier. And to me, watching his film, you could see, hell, this kid can be a player. He can be a player very quickly. He's got some athletic ability and things like that. Matt Patricia loves Jelani Tavai, who he had in Detroit and brought here, and he got some reps last year. Harvey Langey's always been sort of a favorite around here, even when he went to the Jets. I thought his Jets film against the Patriots was excellent. And then Terez Hall is a guy who was stuck around. To me, unless there's some sort of absurd guy who the Patriots fall in love with, I think they're pretty stacked at linebackers in their mind, and they sort of let it play out during camp, especially with McGrone. I think McGrone will be given an opportunity to compete with Mac Wilson and maybe McMillan, and I think they put those top 4 guys, Bentley, Wilson, McMillan, and McGrone, in a blender, and then they see what happens. What do you think about the Patriots, the linebacker position, and the people that are, asking for Dean or, whoever else at linebacker?
Yeah, I think we disagree there a little bit. I think that those guys are fine NFL players, right? Or hopefully.
What do you think of McGrone? What do you think of McGrone coming out?
He's a good athlete. He ran fast. He's going to be, the people that are asking for a little bit more speed. He's like 6'1", 235. He was good, showed good instincts at Michigan, but he missed, later part of his his last season there. And then they drafted him, obviously with the intention of him playing this year and being a guy that they could potentially slide in. But I don't think he's necessarily a difference maker. And I think about some of their best defenses. Even you can go back to Bill's days with the Giants, but just focusing on the run with the Patriots. They went from Bruschi to Gerard Mayo to Dante Hightower to then drafting Jamie Collins. So they clearly value somebody in the middle of that defense that can be a difference maker and rally, really be a leader of the defense.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they have that with any of the people that you ticked off. They don't necessarily have someone that is going to be a playmaker. They don't necessarily have someone that you're going to, look at and be like, that's the leader of the defense. And with Hightower, his future is a little bit unclear. The next evolution of that Patriots linebacker, I think, is potential opportunity to secure that in this draft.
Who do you think fits the bill if they were going to pick a linebacker, whether it's at 21 or they trade down or what have you? Who among the linebackers do you think would be that kind of guy that you're talking about?
I think there's a top tier. There's 1A and 1B, which is Devin Lloyd from Utah's my 1A. 1B is Nakobe Dean from Georgia. And depending whichever one they went with, I think fans should be comfortable with both of those guys. I think could make an impact next year. Then it starts to be, you get into guys like Quay Walker, who I said is I think it would be a great target for them potentially in the second round. His best football is probably in front of him. He's going to need some seasoning though. As I would use the reference, big paws on the pup with a guy like that. But he's going to need to grow into it. Chad Muma, kid from Wyoming. He's a better version, slightly better version, I think, than Logan Wilson, who was drafted by Cincinnati and had a good Super Bowl. He's a guy that could make an impact, more of a tackling guy. He's not necessarily, I think, at that level. So he's kind of at the tier below. I like the Damone Clark from LSU as like a second, third round type guy that they could be a leader of the defense. He's now having surgery on his spine. So he's going to be out next year. So that's maybe a day 3 guy that they could target. But it starts to become guys that are good, could play into the role, but aren't necessarily going to make an impact next year. And that's kind of the tiers I talk about. And so, there's a top 40 guy. You have to get Lloyd or Dean. Those where those guys will be selected for likely first round. Maybe Dean might slip into the second.
Okay. Let's go through at least some of your your mock draft here. Of course, everybody can go to Boston Sports Journal. Our members can read the whole thing. And if you're not a member, this is a perfect time to do that with the draft. And then we'll actually be in person for everything. So, OTAs, when we have access, I'll be able to have my eyes at practice and actually give you my interpretation on the start that these guys get off to. And, and by the way, despite any misinformation out there, I learned a long time ago. I've been doing this 20 years. Every year you live and you learn as far as doing this job. And I learned a very long time ago, I don't give a crap who the Patriots pick. Certainly I will have my binkies that I would want them to pick. But as far as the draft goes, the Patriots pick who they pick, and then we judge them in 3 years. And I might say certain things and give you certain information, like Christian Barmore last year after the draft pick. But as soon as they get on the field for the Patriots, it starts a new era. They are now judged by what they do with the Patriots. What's in the past is in the past. They get a clean slate here, and then they are judged by what they do on the practice field, on film, on game day. And, I know there's a lot of, people who still give me crap about Christian Barmore, but I think my evaluation and reporting on him was highly accurate throughout. And from the time he hit the practice field, I thought he was a tremendous player and was going to have a tremendous impact. I thought he had a great rookie year. Can't wait to see how he follows that up. Some guys take the next step and keep going. Some guys get the taste of being a pro and sort of, maybe don't work out as hard and sort of slip. It's not specific to Christian Barmore. I look at all draft picks that way. So I just wanted to sort of say that as backdrop. So, coming over to BSJ, it's a good time because we never quit with the NFL and the draft. And I'll be at the practice. I'll be at the mini camps. We'll take a little bit of a break. Well, the NFL world will. I won't, other than a week off there in the middle of July to do a long-awaited family vacation. But other than that, we'll be going full steam, and then it's in the training camp. So join up now. You're signed up until the draft next year, and you will get your money's worth. So I'll read off your picks. Kevin, you sort of give me a quick take, including, I think, a little bit of a shocker here, that the Jaguars do not pick Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. You have them taking Evan Neal, the tackle from Alabama.
Yeah, I still haven't taken Neal. It just makes a ton of sense to me that they would continue to invest in Trevor Lawrence. I know that Hutchinson's a relatively clean prospect, but a lot of people in the mocks have moved away from Neal because of they re-signed or they tagged Cam Robinson, their current left tackle.
Not a fan.
Yeah, Neal or Icky, the tackle from NC State, both of them can play guard right away. And so I just think it makes a lot of sense to invest in tackle up front, which would protect Lawrence, and then go get an edge at the top of the second round, which there should be ones available.
Number 2, the Detroit Lions select in what could be the greatest head coach second overall pick pairing of all time. Dan Campbell runs to the podium to select Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan.
Yep. Lions fans would be awful happy with this local Michigan kid. His father still practices medicine at the University of Michigan. And so it's kind of a no-brainer pick for that team.
At number 3, the Houston Texans select safety Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame, who I think I have seen a little bit this week where some slippage, and even one of the Patriots writers, I'm not sure who, it might have been, I don't even know who it was, predicted that he slips down in the draft and the Patriots trade up to get Kyle Hamilton. Is that because of his running time? Is that sort of like the knock on Hamilton, even though I hear his film is just sensational?
Yeah, he ran a 4.59 combine, and then his pro day, I think he may have been in the 4.6s. He plays faster than that. This is a pick I don't have quite as much conviction on, but he's the cleanest guy in the draft, right? As far as from a prospect perspective, he's going to be a good player at the next level, no question about it. Interesting pick for Nick Caserio. now that this is his first full draft. How's he going to look to build his team? Safeties don't traditionally go this early. Cornerbacks don't even usually go this early, which I think is ironic given that it's a passing league. But it is super early for a safety to be going. He's a defensive chess piece. That's the value of him. He's 6'4", 220. He's going to be playing for Lovie Smith, which coming forward, given it's his own defense, I think it's a good fit there. It is a little early, though, for a safety. It hasn't been a safety picked in the top 5 since Eric Berry in about 10 years. And the last safety to go in the top 30, in the top 3 was 30 years ago when Belichick picked Eric Turner. So it's early for Kyle to be taken. It'll be an interesting swing in the draft if he doesn't get picked there, where he goes next.
Number 4, the Jets select one of the most polarizing players in this draft, Kayvon Thibodeau, defensive end, Oregon.
Yeah, and Thibodeau is, the knock on him is, does he love football? You're starting to see a lot of smoke around the internet around that. There's some plays he has on film where he's not necessarily given full max effort. He was dinged up coming into the year with an ankle injury. The kid could have sat out the season and still would have been a top 5 pick. His pressure rate was the second best pressure rate in the country. I think it was like 16.5%, or almost 18% pressure rate. He's not a perfect prospect because of some of the stuff, but I think that's a lot of the smoke that you just hear around draft time when it comes down to
like your comp Clowney, who was a guy who he was a no doubt first overall pick, but I went and saw him live in South Carolina when I was at Sports Illustrated. I wrote him up for Sports Illustrated. I didn't love him. I didn't love him at first overall. I didn't think that he loved the game enough.
Yep. And that's the knock on Thibodeau. I just think his athleticism is going to allow him to drop too far.
The Giants at number 5 select offensive tackle Ikem Ekwonu, NC State.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Rashawn Slater is the right comp for him. He
loves Slater.
Even if you think this kid, he's 6'4", he probably has the length to play tackle. Even if you think he's a guard, he's like the Quentin Nelson type prospect from a guard perspective. So he's a top 6 or 7 kid. He might even go higher than that. Really kind of clean prospect. And Giants fans know that their offensive line's a dumpster fire. So this fit for them.
At number 6, the Panthers get their, we think, quarterback of the future, Kenny Pickett from Pittsburgh, Mr. Two Gloves himself.
Yeah, I've had Kenny consistently going to since the start of this process, going to Carolina. I just think it makes a lot of sense in 2 ways. One is, they're getting pressure, that franchise, to get their next quarterback. Matt Rule actually recruited Kenny Pickett when he was at Temple. And Rule moved down to Baylor, ended up going to Baylor, and Kenny went to Pitt, but there's the relationship there. He's the most pro-ready of the quarterbacks coming out of the draft. Carolina needs it, and I'm not worried about the hand size playing down in Carolina, given their little bit warmer weather and they play in domes, in that division.
Let's I'll name off some picks if there's something certainly pressing that you want to add on, explanation front. Interject, but I think we'll skip into the teens. The Giants take Travon Walker from Georgia, you talked about earlier. The Falcons get their quarterback of the future, Malik Willis from Liberty. The Seahawks take Sauce Gardner, the cornerback from Cincinnati. The Jets get Drake London from USC. That would be interesting, and put him with Elijah Molden on the inside. Plus what the other stuff that they've done. I think they've had a good offseason. That would be interesting. Commanders take Devin Lloyd, we talked about. Vikings at 12 take Jermaine Johnson, who you mentioned earlier. Interesting here, the Texans take Trevor Penning, the tackle from Northern Iowa, who we talked about. Interesting Taylor Lewan comp that you had. This is where I think, if the Patriots have if they want to tackle, and they have a inkling that Caserio might take one, do they jump up and take Penning here?
Yep. Yeah, there's definitely a chance that could happen. I think Houston's going to look tackle at whether it's with 3 or here where they could get Cross or Penning. It's getting risky for them, even if they're waiting for tackle here at this point. And I think Houston's needs, in my mind, is, they got to go best player available. I think is the easiest way to kind of frame it. But they weren't a very good run blocking team last year, and they gave up the most yards per pass in the league, right? And Justin Reed just left or signed with Kansas City. So those kind of the two places I was thinking with that. Either they go tackle early or they go defensive backfield late if they don't trade.
The Ravens, and we're getting into the trade up territory and players that we've mentioned that the Patriots could be interested in. The Ravens take Derek Stingley Jr., the cornerback from LSU. That would sting. But the Ravens might just stick. I mean, they just signed Calais Campbell, so I don't think they'll be involved in Jordan Davis now. I think they're good. Two-year deal for Davis. The Eagles take Garrett Wilson, Ohio State. If Garrett Wilson is available at 15 and the Patriots don't trade up with Howie Roseman, Patriots fans are going to lose their freaking mind.
Yeah,
Kevin.
I hear you. And listen, I wouldn't be upset if they picked a wide receiver, right? Because that means that they're going to have a ton of conviction on the guy, and I could see the value of stacking a weapon with Mac. But Philly fans are going to want a wide receiver themselves, and Philly fans are going to walk out of this draft with a wide receiver, a defensive back, or a linebacker, right? That's what they're chanting for down there.
The Saints take Charles Cross, the offensive tackle from Mississippi State, who we mentioned, at 16. At 17, the Chargers, and I love this pick because it totally fits what they need because they suck up front. Jordan Davis from Georgia. If he's there and the Patriots don't jump up to 16 to get him, I'm going to be mighty ticked off. At 18, the Eagles take Trent McDuffie from Washington. Tell me about McDuffie, because that's I don't know a lot about him. And if they're looking for a cornerback, like, how would you compare him to Stingley in terms of, should they want to trade up for him?
Yeah, if they trade up for him, I think that's a good sign that they like him. I think the breakdown on Trent is that he's a really good player. He's a 3-year starter, first team Pac-12. He's not the biggest guy, but he's a competitor. He tackles really, really, really well. He's a clean prospect, kind of a good kind of floor evaluation. There's some questions, just like, not quite as much the issue that you got with Roger McCreary, but there's some questions about his size, his arm length, which is a concern for corners. That's one of the positions that NFL evaluators really look at their arm length. He's got good instincts. My knock on McDuffie is that he doesn't turn the ball over, right? So he's only got 2, 3-year starter I referenced, but he's only got 2 interceptions in like 28 games. You
can't replace Mr. INT with that stuff. Get out of here.
And so unless they dump the trash truck right up to where he's at, he's not. It hasn't proven to be a guy that turns the ball over. And the Washington Huskies run a zone defense. So if you're betting on McDuffie, it's that you bet that he can transfer those skills over to man, which you should at that level. But it gets a little bit harder from an evaluation perspective. And that's why I say if they pick him, that's because they got some conviction. But he's going to be really good in the interview room. They're going to like him. And he's definitely a guy that they're considering. Would they trade up to get him? That's a different question.
The Saints get their quarterback, Matt Corral, from Ole Miss at 19. The Steelers take Devontae Wyatt from Georgia, which I could see. Seems like their type of guy. I've avoided Wyatt and other guys similar to him because I just think, the Patriots have Barmore already, and they already have Dietrich Wise, and he ain't going anywhere. He'll probably be extended until he's 50. He's the new Patrick Chung in terms of that. We just saw him get his signing bonus up front. At 21 on the clock, facing Jamison Williams, Chris Olave, Johan Dotson. The Patriots have traded their pick to the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, oh man, I could just hear it now. Like, you got to be effing kidding me. Bill doesn't know what he's doing anymore. He's totally washed up. The game's passed him by. Like, I could totally hear it now.
This is a gift for Felger and Maz right there. I mean, that is.
Oh, my God.
Talk radio will be burning up if it plays out like that. But I think there's a decent chance it could.
And the Patriots end up taking At 30, they take Dax Hill from Michigan, who I think, where did they take McCourty? Like 31, 32 out of Rutgers?
He was right at that back end. I think he was 32 right out of Rutgers.
He was 32. This would be 30 after passing on a bunch of guys that they could use. Kevin, I am rooting for things to work out this way because it would be mass chaos and it would be a lot of fun watching. And I'm not into, the rookie year. Hey, how are they doing? Look what this guy's doing. I'm not interested in that. Maybe second year we could talk about it a little bit, but really the third year, and you got to see how things play out. I'm very much in the boat. Yes, I'm critical of Belichick. I'm not a moron. I have eyes. I see what's going on. I see what the record is of the last 40 games. Robert Kraft, I backed a lot of us up who have been critical about where this team is and where it might be going with his comments about the drafts, about no playoff victories. But still, I give Belichick a wide berth. Belichick has earned the opportunity to do whatever he wants in terms of how he did this offseason with free agency and the trades and the draft. I do not hate Bill Belichick. He can do whatever he wants. We will sit back and judge. The scoreboard will be plain to everybody. We all saw it some of those years. You can read the rest of the draft, including, and this is the most interesting part for me, and I think our members love it. Kevin predicts their picks. If they sit where they are, of course they won't. They'll trade down 5 times. But some of their picks: Dax Hill, Travis Jones, Chad Mamuma. They do get a tackle and a couple other needed things. So make sure you check that out on BSJ. Let's get to our member question of the day. Check us out over at BSJ for $39.99 on our annual plan. Not only do you get top-notch analysis of all the Boston Pro Sports, plus Kevin's draft analysis year-round, but if you're a Patriots junkie and if you're listening to this podcast, you are, then a membership at BSJ gives you access to a ton of video analysis Bedard does on the coaches film. I will be doing a game film piece on Mack Wilson this week. I have no preconceived notions. I watch the film, and then I make my determination on the guy and see where he might fit and what his ceiling would be, what I might be worried about, that sort of thing, which I just did with Devontae Parker last week. So Kevin picked out a question on Nakobe Dean that he got in his chat. Maybe we can get Kevin for another chat here coming up, depending on his travel status. And plus, if Kevin has the BSJ app on his phone, which I'm sure he does while he's sitting on a plane, he could knock it out on his app while he's traveling back to the States. But what was the question about Nakobe Dean?
Yeah, the question was, and this comes from Pat's North Attleboro, who always asks good questions. The knock on Nakobe Dean is obvious, his size. When you watched him, how did Georgia use him in the run game? Is that translatable to the NFL game in general and the Patriots in particular? And so Dean's definitely a guy that they'll be evaluating deeply as part of the process. So Georgia used him as their middle linebacker. He was the leader of their defense. He won the Butkus Award for the top linebacker in college. He plays really fast. He's a really, really smart kid. He's got mechanical engineering GPA. I think it's north of like 3.5. And one of his strengths is his read and reacts early on downs. He does a good job blitzing, coming forward, coming through the A gap. Georgia rotated him this past year, and that's not because there were other better players or anything like that. It was just because they were so deep, and those two guys, Quay Walker and Channing Tindall, are going to get drafted themselves. So he's a really good player. He's got a lot of speed. There was a little bit he may drop because he didn't do anything from a pre-draft perspective, didn't run at the combine, didn't even run at his pro day. So some teams may question his speed. But he plays fast. He plays especially fast going horizontally and getting through the trash. I think the two big concerns with Nakobe is covering tight ends, given his size. And he was in second, he was covered up by 3 guys. Devontae Wyatt, like Jordan Davis. The edges.
You could make plays behind exactly. Those guys. I
would make plays, Greg. No question about it. So I think that It makes it so much easier for those linebackers to get through the trash to get to the ball carrier when you have that sort of protection. So that's really all linebackers, but smaller guys need it more than most. I've compared him all year to Ray Lewis coming out of Miami. I want to be very clear. I'm not comparing him to a Hall of Famer. That wouldn't be fair. But Ray, when he was coming out of Miami, was 6 feet, 235. And Ray was very protected at Baltimore, right? He always had room to kind of move. They invested a lot in that defensive line to keep him protected. So if you think Nakobe's the guy, you pick him, but you got to protect him and try to not let him get isolated on tight ends. Seam routes would be a challenge for him given his height and size.
I'll be watching him coming up, but how would you, off the cuff, how would you think he projects to, how does he compare to the Colts linebacker, Darius Leonard, who was a guy in that draft where I was like, I want the Patriots to get him, and they totally passed on him.
Yeah, if you want Darius Leonard, then you want Devin Lloyd.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
So
is Nakobe deemed smaller than Leonard's skinny, but he's long and somewhat tall, I would think. That's the way it comes off.
Yeah, the Devin Lloyd's 6'3", 235, 240 with some, and he looks skinny, just like Darius Leonard looks. So very, very comparable. If you like Leonard or you like Fred Warner, like Devin Lloyd's your guy. Nakobe Dean's like, he might be under 6 feet, Greg. He might be a 5'11", 230 guy. He almost looks, harkening back to the older members on subscribers of BSJ. He's like a Jesse Tuggle.
Yep. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty short. I mean, 5'11". I mean, we're talking Zach Thomas territory. Not that Zach Thomas couldn't play. But interesting. Okay, that'll wrap it up. I kept Kevin way too long. Kevin, I appreciate it. I thought this was awesome. Anytime you want to jump back on, we'll probably try to do the same thing up until the draft. Tape on Sunday, release on Monday. We'll get Kevin for a Q&A, grab a couple questions from that as we go forward, and we'll probably have an all Q&A podcast sort of the week of the draft. We'll ask for questions and stuff like that. But appreciate it, buddy. Have safe travels, and don't be a stranger around here.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it, and talk to you folks soon.